Hey, Perry, can you hear me? It's Counselor Gentile.
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Okay, because I wasn't hearing anything, so I guess we're good. Katie, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, we were just muted. Scott's in here with me too.
Okay. I see one other counselor, so we need to wait a little bit. All right, why don't we get started? I see we have at least four counselors, so um, this is Monday evening,
Recording in progress.
October the 28th. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee. Present at the start of the meeting, I see Counselor Mickley from Ward 2, Counselor Malachi from Ward 3, Counselor Gentile from Ward 4, and Counselor Humphrey from Ward 5, and various other folks, staff, and who will introduce themselves as we go along. And I see that we're being joined by Counselor Greenberg, so there are five to start. The first item is docket item 400-24, President Laredo appointing J.P. Namias, I hope I pronounced that correctly, 15 Burridge Road in Newton as a member of the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for a term to expire on November 24th. I see Mr. Namias, I believe, has joined us. There he is. Okay. So, Mr. Namias, this is easygoing. We just wanted you to come in so that we can meet you, give you an opportunity to tell us just a little bit about your background and why you are interested in this committee. There may be a question or two, and then I'm sure we will move the appointment. We've also been joined by Counselor Bixby from Ward 6. So, JP, if you don't mind me calling you that, go right ahead.
Sure. Everyone calls me JP. So it was a nickname for my grandmother. She wanted me to be like JP Morgan and become very rich, which I am not. So, but maybe one day. So it's very nice to meet y'all. As was said, I live in Newton Center, just by BC West or North, however you want to define it. I've been in startups pretty much my whole career. Currently, I run product management for a business line and act as the general manager for a software company based in North Carolina after the acquisition of my last company. And I was approached and was talking with David actually. And I actually have a background in public policy. And I've been very interested in helping out, government and NGOs pretty much my entire career, but I've never actually acted on it. And I decided that now might be a good time to step back from my software duties and start to think about what I want to do when I grow up. And the first thing that we had talked about was, hey, why don't you come and help us out on the financial audit committee? We could use some help, and given your background, it might be a worthwhile thing for me to do. And so I said, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to help out, see how I can help, see what's going on within the city and see how I can help, given my background in startups.
Okay. I see we've been joined by Councilor Grossman from Ward 7, so we're up to 7 out of 8 councilors. Are there any questions for the candidate, the recommended candidate? Council Mickley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions, just a few comments if that's okay at this moment.
Sure.
Great, thanks. Just wanted to share my recommendation on JP for this role. You can look at his resume for yourself in the packet. I know him as a member of the synagogue community that I'm a part of, and just a few words on his character. JP is the kind of guy always looking to be proactive, to help out, to see where there's a need for something to be done better, and to take the initiative. As a member of the Financial Advisory Audit Committee myself, we're always looking for new ideas, fresh perspectives. And I think JP is just the kind of person that we need to make sure we're not missing things and keeping a close critical eye to how we're auditing the city's finances. So my recommendation on JP for this role both stems from his professional background and also from the character that I know of him just from being a fellow member of the community. So just wanted to share those words.
Thank you. Council Maliki.
Oh, I don't have any demanding questions either. I just wanted to say welcome and thank you for being willing to do this. And I look forward to having your input. Do you have notable experience with dealing with selecting or dealing with your auditors in the businesses that you've been involved in?
So I've actually been in fintech. So I've had auditing for the last couple of years in my blood because we do account opening processes and those have to be audited like crazy. So there's a whole ledger in the back as you open up accounts as a bank that has to go through a whole financial audit review and compliance review. So I've been doing systems for auditing and things like that over the past couple of years just in my normal day-to-day job.
Great, super. Well, thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have a comment or a question? Seeing none, Council Mickley, would you like to move it?
So moved.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay. Any other input? Seeing none, all those in favor of the appointment, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes 7-0. JP, this will go to the full council for approval at our first meeting in November, which I believe is Monday, November the 4th. It should be all approved then. Okay, thank you for willing to serve.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, next item is docket item 401-24. President Laredo appointing Patrick Moriarty, 9 Hillside Road in Newton, as a member of the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for a term to expire on November the 4th, 2027. Is Mr. Moriarty here? I don't see him. Katie, do you know if we were able to reach him to come in tonight?
We didn't hear back from him and we also didn't get his resume, so we didn't include that. Yeah,
Should probably move to hold then.
Is that a motion, Council Humphrey?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Motion to hold. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion to hold passes 7-0. Next item is 384-24, Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend $53,015.90 from an FY 25 grant for municipal road safety from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security for the purpose of funding traffic safety enforcement, overtime, safety equipment, pedestrian and bike enforcement overtime, safety activities, professional development on safety and bike ped safety items, including bike lights, reflectors and flags. I see that we have the chief here. I'm gonna stop calling you acting chief. You've been doing it long enough, so I'm just gonna call you chief. Is that all right, chief?
That's fine, sir. You're the boss.
All right. Go right ahead, please.
Thank you, counselors. Counselor Gentile pretty much outlined everything that we are asking for. This is an annual grant that we ask for probably the last 5 or 10 years. This year, we've gotten a little over $53,000 from the 60 that we applied for. Our original bid was $60,000 and it was downgraded because there were a significant amount of departments that put in for this grant. As the Counselor Gentile had said, about $38,000 of this is going towards overtime, another $4,000 to buy a new traffic data recorder, $5,000 for a training conference for 2 of our officers to attend to talk about safety and get advanced training in what other people are doing around the country, other departments rather. And the final bid is $5,000 for bike equipment, whether it's lights, reflectors, flags. We might buy some helmets as well. So that's essentially what it is. Thank you.
Okay, anyone have a question or a comment? So we've been getting this for a number of years.
Yes, sir.
Councilor Bixby.
I just want to say thank you, for bringing in, especially there was so much backup data in the packet. We talk about this stuff a lot in public safety and transportation, but it's helpful to have it, in multiple places and to have this be a priority. So thanks for putting in the grant and all the work that goes into this from all those fronts. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Council Bixby, would you care to move it?
I'd love to.
Okay,
So moved.
any other comments or questions? Okay, we have a motion to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, again, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, chief.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Are you doing the next one or is it someone else that's gonna do this next one?
Me, Counselor.
Who's me? Okay.
Shauna.
All right. 390-24, Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to transfer and expend $29,056.47 from Trio Mitigation Funds for the purpose and installation of a new rectangular rapid flashing beacon for the crosswalk across Lowell Avenue at Page Road. Okay.
Evening,
Shauna?
as you just noted, this is a request for $29,056 to install a much needed rectangular rapid flashing beacon pedestrian signal, otherwise known as an RFB, at Page and Lowell Ave. The intersection is a high priority in our RFB ranking and creates a safer crossing along a safe routes to school corridor and a heavily used pedestrian travel route to and from Newtonville.
Okay. Questions? Let me start with Council Grossman and then Council Mickley.
Thank you very much. And I'm certainly in support of these installations where possible across the city. My question is a bit more general about financing installations like this at various crosswalks in the city. And it's a topic that has come up in my ward recently that I've actually been asked quite a bit about. And, you know, I'm intimately familiar with the fact that when we have larger traffic installations or, you know, requests for big changes like an actual stoplight or extremely expensive undertakings, those are very much prioritized by the city and ranked. Obviously, here we have a source of funding that is linked to a particular location, which makes a ton of sense. I guess my broader question is where we have crosswalks in the city, if there are random pockets of funding, like say, for example, a homeowner wanted to fund the installation of an RRFB on a particular crosswalk, would we accept it? I mean, how do we think about whether and when it's appropriate and what sources of funding are appropriate to use? Because, you know, it's obvious that these aren't necessarily coming in order of a particular prioritization list.
So we just recently applied to the state for an additional grant. I believe it's to fund 10 different locations. Private funding, we would need to check with the law department. I'm not sure how they would fall on that. We are planning also on spending additional funding from ARPA on some RFBs.
So I guess just as a follow-up to that, and I'll take the example of a stop sign. Even when we're evaluating whether a stop sign goes someplace, we're looking at, is it called for with traffic counts and usage and that sort of thing. It seems to me with the RRFBs that they're essentially called for anywhere there's a crosswalk. Is that accurate?
Not necessarily. They have to consider MUTCD rules and so forth. There is a prioritization on our website that explains the method of the rankings and why it is a good place for an RFB. I'm more than happy to send that to the committee.
No, that's totally fine. I guess what I'm looking for is examples of crosswalks where it wouldn't be appropriate to have an RRFB, just to understand a little bit more clearly. You know, if we're having a crosswalk, why wouldn't we want a blinking yellow light there to indicate the car should slow down?
I can ask Ned Cott, our Director of Transportation, for a more thorough explanation on that. But
well, and I can ask that in the PS&T context as well. I just was really trying to ask also from the financing side.
So I think sometimes it's because it's too close to an actual pedestrian crossing, a crosswalk, so that we wouldn't necessarily put the RFB there. It wouldn't be a top priority for that location. That doesn't mean in the future, when we have the priorities done, that we wouldn't consider an RFB there. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Council Maliki?
Yes, so these come in pairs, right?
Yes.
So there's one on each side, and
Yes.
is this sort of the going rate for installing a pair of RFBs?
This one is slightly more expensive. If you give me a second, I'll find that explanation on why. We have to add an additional component to this one. It needs a the addition due to the location of the utility poles, the beacon assembly with the lights needs to be on the near side of the pole, away from the crosswalk itself. As a result, we need to purchase and install a standalone pedestrian push button post.
Okay,
Is
so
adding to the cost.
okay, and what would a normal one cost? Basically, the normal would be if there's already a pole to put it on.
No, this is a full installation with the pole, and so
Oh.
it's actually the additional little arm for the push button. It needs a separate push
Oh.
button pole.
I guess I'll
They are generally between 15 and 20,000. This also includes the police details to install, along with the additional post for the push button.
So if you didn't need a police detail for some reason, although I assume these are kind of going in on the busier streets, but without the police detail, the cost would be
It's 15 to 20,000, I
Right.
would say.
For
That's a rough estimate, yeah.
Okay. Just
They've
wondering.
gone up as construction costs have gone up.
Yeah, and did you say the ranking of planned and prospective RFP locations, is that currently on the website now?
It is.
Okay, great.
I'm happy to send you all the link.
Great. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Council Mickley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to comment on this in particular, the Ward 2 councilors have come together to discuss prioritization for tree mitigation funds, and we all agreed this being a priority, given many residents have asked for it. You'll see more of these type of tree mitigation fund things coming through the pipeline. We want to spend it as quickly as possible to put it to work. And then just a broader question on the RRB bidding process. Yeah, I totally understand they're expensive. Is there any way we can create a more competitive bidding process to drive the price down? Anything that we've explored to, because there's just obviously a need across the city. We hear requests from them all the time.
We could try to bid it out again and see what we come back with, but we run the risk then of getting more expensive low bid.
Yeah, I'm not saying for this one in particular. I'm saying for
Mhm.
more in general, or even if we could bid them in batches, if we order 10 or 15 together. Because again, as Councilor Grossman was alluding to, this is something that residents across the city want. And I'm just wondering if there's a financial strategy we can employ to get a better deal on our RFBs at scale.
These generally fall under our on-call contract. We bid out this type of work to we award it to 3 different contractors. And we start with the low bid first and then move down. So
Okay.
we rebid probably every 3 years.
Okay.
Actually, it is
Okay.
every 3, unless we're dissatisfied and then we would go out earlier.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, you all set, David?
Yep.
The only thing I wanted to mention is what I have heard from folks that are near one of these locations, and I've actually seen it myself, because there's one by my office in Auburndale on Lexington Street. And in Grove. The Auburn Street, excuse me. Sometimes, you know, people just go barreling right through them. And I'm sure you've probably heard that. I think most of the time it's because it's new and people didn't expect it. I don't think they just blatantly want to go through it. But I'm just, but the other part of it is, it's not as stark or as noticeable, you know, as like a red light. So has there been some talk about maybe modifying these a little bit to try and get better compliance?
Not that I'm aware of. I can check in with Ned Cod, the Director of Transportation. I am aware that there are some concerns out there regarding that.
Okay, so you are hearing a little bit of that?
I am.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the item?
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or any abstentions? Okay, then the motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, docket item 367-24. This was held the last time in order to get Michelle Pizzi O'Brien the opportunity to come in and tell us a little bit about it. It's her honor the mayor requesting authorization to appropriate and expend the sum of $50,000 grant from an FY25 Community Compact Grant Program for the development of a wage and classification plan. Okay, Ms. O'Brien, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Gentile, and thank you for moving the meeting as I struggled with a bad cold, I think the day that you had it last. really excited about this opportunity. It's not so often as you see grants available for human resources work. So I'm very excited that we had the opportunity to apply and be granted $50,000 to do a classification and compensation study. And, you know, I do expect the cost will be more than this, but that is the max that they give for this grant. So I'm excited for that. And I'm happy to explain what a classification and compensation study is. We haven't started this. Right now, we're just looking to accept the grant funds and get started on the process. But I have been through this many, many times in my years in municipal HR. So I know it can be a long process, but a very important one, and one that I think that we really need. And I've been talking about for some time. The mayor has been very supportive of this work. So I'm glad to see that we're going to be starting it. If you'd like, I can talk briefly about what a class and compensation plan is. I don't want to presume that everyone knows what that is, but Councilor Gentile, if you'd like, I can speak to that for a moment, or just answer questions.
Well, why don't you just tell us briefly of how it works?
Yep.
You can give us the short version, and then we'll see if there's questions.
Sure. My hope is to work with the Collins Center. I'm not exactly sure what our process will be in terms of working with Nick and his group and what the requirements might be. I believe they're exempt from the bidding process and all that. So I don't think we'll have to do that. But let's say we do when we go through that process and are able to work with the Collins Center. Their system is very similar to systems with other consultants that do this kind of work. Basically a class and comp plan. And I think on the agenda it says wage and classification, which is essentially the same thing. So classifications are titles and job duties, and compensation is wage, is compensation. It's a structured system. It's used to manage employee pay and job classifications, so titles and job descriptions. Typically involves categorizing positions together based on their duties and the required qualifications. And the process does that in order to ensure equitable compensation for similar work. So you're comparing similar positions to other similar positions within your organization and outside of your organization. In my experience, a really good structured class and compensation plan helps cities to attract and retain and even motivate employees by aligning their pay with market rates as well as internal equity. Also provides transparency for employees on how we pay and develop our compensation plans and our grades and our positions and expectations. Also supports with compliance with pay equity laws. There was a big push to do this back in 2017. And also helps to facilitate, HR functions like recruitment, performance evaluation, workforce planning, and typically results in a mechanism for employees to request a reclassification, which I think we definitely need. So that way we have a system in place and how we go about doing it. And it's clear and it's transparent, makes it easier to say, yes, absolutely. We're seeing changes within your job description, and also makes it easy to say no when it's appropriate to say no. So that's essentially the high level of what a class and compensation plan is. It does take a bit of time to do this work. I would expect we wouldn't start engaging with a consultant until January of this year. We're in the middle of a special open enrollment period that's going to be announced by the end of the week in greater detail. So we'll be busy with that for a bit. We'll start in January, take some time. If there's any impacts that might require funding, then we'd have to wait until the appropriate funding process to go about that as well. So it could take a year, it could take even a year and a half, depending on the funding cycle. But it's good and important work, and I'm excited for it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Pizzi O'Brien. When was the last time the city went through this process?
So funny that you asked that question, Counselor. I was trying to figure that out exactly, but I was not able to. We do use the grade Hay, H-A-Y, and Hay Associates is a group that was really active in the HR circles in the 1990s. So I think maybe that's when we did it last, but I would be wrong to say that that's certain. I'm not exactly sure when that was done, but it has been some time, and we desperately, I think, need it, and it'll have a good impact on our city.
So it sounds like we're due to upgrade and update our structure and our system in our city.
Yes, yes. It doesn't always end up with significant changes typically, because we put a lot of time into looking at our positions and our position descriptions right now. We just don't have the structured system that I think we need to make sure that that can be done in a timely manner and a consistent manner. But we make a sincere effort to look at positions constantly, most especially when they become vacant. I'd like to have the system in place so we have a mechanism to review on a constant basis, and then have those factors and parameters that you look at in a job description. So we're looking at them on an equitable basis from position to position to position. So it's been some time, but it'll have a good impact.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Greenberg, I mean, you know how roughly long I've been around, and I can remember hearing about the Hay study when I first started. So it's been quite some time before we've done something like this.
Wow, okay.
Does anyone else have a question? Julia, do you, or did your hands still up?
Yes. So is this for positions not covered by collective bargaining? Is it separate from that?
It is. It is. Our union positions, they have a compensation plan that's negotiated with all of our unions that already exist. And doing this kind of work would require bargaining with our unions. So right now we're looking at our non-union positions, but in my experience, I've done this several times, starting with our union positions, and we often see our unions energized by the good work, and sometimes bring that up at the bargaining table. But those conversations are subject to the collective bargaining law, so it would have to be something we would discuss with the unions when we go through that process. We are actively negotiating with all of our unions right now, and I imagine that, you know, something like this might come up. When it comes to our union positions, we do regularly, Counselor, do classification reviews with our unions during the bargaining process and make changes to position descriptions or expectations, certifications, licenses, or whatever it is. So not having a system like this for all of our unions doesn't have the same impact that it does on the non-union side, because we are engaging with them every 3 years. So they're definitely in much better shape than I think our union positions are. But I'd be open to having conversations about that if that came up.
And roughly how many positions would be covered by this?
So we have approximately, I think, 160 non-union titles, but they don't do duplicates. So if you have, and I'll use HR as an example, if you happen to have an HR generalist and you have 2 employees, it's counted as 1. So in my review of all those positions and where there are duplicates, there's 134 positions. Committee clerk is a perfect example. We have a couple of committee clerks, so they would just be counted as 1. So there'll be about 134 titles likely contemplated in this project.
Okay, and when you talked about the equity issue, I assume that's to do with making sure that jobs that tend to be filled by women, if there are such a thing still, are not disadvantaged, or vice versa, versus jobs filled by men, or that type of thing?
Yes, it's even broader than that. I mean, we look at pay equity in all types of circumstances, not just related to gender, but we're looking at that as well, but also equity within our organization, that, you know, a job that might require you to supervise 10 positions, and then you have another job that requires you to supervise 10 positions, that there's equity amongst those positions over and above who holds those roles. But in addition to that, we also look at where our female employees are being paid compared to our male employees. But the system itself creates the equity that you need in order to avoid that kind of gap. And then we also look at equity externally. We'll look at like communities, which I have to admit has been a bit challenging. We're very unique in Newton. I struggle often to find several communities that are like ours, where my previous community was a lot easier to find comparables. but we'll go through a process to determine what communities we want to look at. And we look at those communities as well to have equity amongst our competitors and also be ahead of the market where we can be in order to recruit and retain talent.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Council Bixby.
Thanks. This seems important to do, and it's great that we got the state grant for it. You said at the beginning that this might cost more than the grant, and I was just wondering if you had a sense of how much more that might be and where that might come from.
Yeah, I would expect the cost of it could be anywhere between 80,000 and 100,000, but I do think because we have some duplicate titles, it's going to be closer to the 80,000 range. But the HR department intentionally set aside money in its consulting line, hoping that we would receive this grant. So I was very happy when we did, because we wouldn't have the additional funds otherwise, or we'd have to find it somewhere else. But you typically see a class and comp plan of this size of 150 to 200 positions costs anywhere between $80,000 and $100,000.
Thanks.
All
So it
set,
sounds like you've got the. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. You asked the question that I had, so I'm all set. Any other questions, comments? If not, can I get a motion to approve or accept the grant?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Council Malachi. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes 7-0. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Counselor Gentile. And thank you, everyone, for letting me come to this next meeting. Have a good night.
All right, next item is 389-24. Your Honor, the Mayor requesting authorization to acquire an 11,200 square foot portion of the Price Center parking lot at 25-27 Christina Street for the price of $430,000 to be used for development of access to a new shared use path bridge over the Charles River. Programs and services already approved this 6-0. Who's going to present this?
I'll start, Councilor Gentile.
Okay, Bonnie, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, so as you said, the programs and services, some of the same members that you have on your committee sat on that last week. So Jen Martin, our Director of Transportation Planning, has a brief presentation that will kind of set the context, and we're happy to answer questions.
Okay, and will there be a little bit of talk about, how the price was arrived at?
Yes, I can speak to that.
Okay, Ms. Martin, go right ahead. It's all yours.
Okay. Katie, can you share the slides on your end?
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay. So this is a image rendering of what the proposed bridge will look like. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is situating the Christina Street Bridge here, just off the Charles River, off Needham Street. Okay, the next slide, please. So why this bridge is important. The bridge will provide a connection to existing and future paths, including the DCR Blue Heron Trail just across the river in Needham, which connects over to workforce and housing in the Needham Crossing area and recreation opportunities. It also will connect over to the Upper Falls Greenway through new connections in the two Northland developments, and actually continues further north along a spur over to the Upper Falls Greenway further north as well. Okay, the next slide, please. In 2021, the city released the Christina Street Rail Bridge Shared Use Path Feasibility Report and Concept Level Plans. So the two images on the left there are the current condition of the bridge, The planned bridge is on the right. The preferred design option is for a new prefab truss bridge to be installed where the current dilapidated bridge is. This option was chosen for the numerous benefits it offers bridge users and boaters in the Charles River and has lower life cycle maintenance costs. Okay, next slide, please. The city has received a $1.25 million federal earmark through 2022 economic development legislation to advance this project. It will fund both design of the bridge and the land acquisition we're here to discuss tonight. The funding must be committed by 12/31/2024 and spent by the end of 2026. In 2023, the city submitted the project proposal to MassDOT to help qualify the project for federal and state funding for construction. So it is on the tip. Next slide. Since access from Newton would be across Ferry Price Center land, this parking lot you see here, the city has been working closely with the Price Center to ensure that the final design will meet the needs of their clientele. Next slide. This just shows the land situated to the bridge and then across to the proposed pathway network of the approved Northland Charlemont 40B project. And then final slide. So as Director Heath said, last week, Programs and Services Committee approved the acquisition. We're here at the Finance Committee tonight to ask for the same. And then subject to City Council approval, the Law Department will move forward with the land acquisition. We've partnered with VHB for the design work. They also did the concept plan, and there will be extensive public outreach throughout the design starting in 2025. Okay.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to add, Jen, or are we going back to Bonnie on this?
I think we can go back to Director Heath about how we arrived at this price.
Okay.
Sure, happy to speak to that. So we followed the standard procedure that we would follow when acquiring property by hiring an appraisal firm to give us an appraisal. And if you saw the image that Jen showed, it was the back portion of the parking lot. We looked at a couple of different schemes. One was taking a larger portion, which included that entire driveway, and this scenario C, which was leaving the driveway open and just taking the portion that we needed for access to the bridge. Our appraiser that we hired calculated that as $391,000 as fair compensation. The Price Center had their own appraisal done of the property, and their appraisal come in at 1.7 million. We subsequently had a conversation with them about it. Standard practice when a city is acquiring property, they generally can go 10% above the appraisal. So we offered 430,000, which they accepted. Throughout the conversation with the Price Center, we've had very productive meetings with them. They share the city's desire to clean up that portion of the parking lot and to make the bridge accessible and safe. They're going to be part of the stakeholder group that looks at the details in terms of fencing and access and all how that works, so that it works with their operation. So that's the answer in terms of how we arrived at 430,000.
Okay, great. Let's see, I see Councilor Mickley has his hand up. Go right ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks, Barney. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the explanation, Barney. Just a few questions. The first is, can you just clarify how the number that was between 390 and 1.7 million ended up at 430? Was
Yeah.
it 1.7 for the whole property or just for that portion of the property?
No, it's beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. Their appraiser thought the diminishment of value to the property was 1.7 million. Ours was 390,000. So we didn't meet in the middle. We met where the city was comfortable. We said this is our final offer. And as I said, we've had productive conversations with them. And we explained, that's as far as we could offer. And they were fine with that.
Okay, great. And then just the other question is, the way they're currently using that portion of the property, any expected impact or consequences on the neighborhood from potential parking pressure or other pressures from them not having that property anymore?
I don't think so. So the main issue that they have actually is at arrival and dismissal, much like a school, because most of their clients come by van. So it's not so much the need for parking spaces, but room in the parking lot for the vans to queue up at arrival and dismissal. They've been working very hard on a new plan. They've instituted a change now, but I think they have greater plans to make the portion of the parking lot that they will need even more efficient. That portion in the back was mainly used for snow storage, if you will. And by allowing that second driveway, it still gives them the flexibility they need to get in and out. So we don't anticipate an issue with parking.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, well, I only really had a question about the establishment of the value, and you certainly answered that. Council Maliki.
Yeah, so at Programs and Services, Councilor Krinsman raised a question about wanting to see a permanent open space restriction on it. Have you done anything to address that?
Yes. So, Councilor Maliki, we did look at that issue, and we think the cleanest way to handle that is to put the property, when it's acquired, in control of the Parks and Rec division, so that they have custody of it. And I don't know the details of it, but I think it might be under Article 97 at that point, which provides a similar protection.
So I'm not totally expert on that. Do we have to sort of do something to establish that it is small as it is a park, as opposed to just putting it under that department to have the Chapter 97 protection?
Yeah, it's an excellent question that I can't answer for you, but that was my understanding, but I think we need to get you some more information and the council on that. I don't know, Jen, if you had got any more details on that, but that was my understanding.
That was my understanding as well. I think Andrew Lee might be able to join us and answer the question in a second.
Okay. And I would think it would also have some protection from its proximity to the Charles River, but I don't know exactly the distances. I don't think anyone could actually build anything on it anyway, could they?
I don't think so, because of the proximity. It's right literally on the river.
Yeah.
But we can get some guidance on that as well.
All right, while we're waiting in case Attorney Lee joins us, are there any other questions that members of the committee have? Councilor Humphrey.
Not a question, just a comment from the Programs and Services discussion, and in relation to what just came up. So if we do have to put some restriction or something, that can be added later. But there's some time-consuming elements to doing that, apparently. And this particular funding request involves state ARPA money, not city ARPA money, but state ARPA money that was earmarked to us. And so we have to get that, out the door by the end of this year. So we're just making sure we get this voted through the full council in a timely manner. And then we also had discussed sort of bigger picture, longer term outside of this particular element of it, the land acquisition, where the money is coming from for various components. And the city is, using some staff time on this, but otherwise it's the funding so far is coming from, state earmark, Northland project mitigation related things, potentially some private funding from stakeholders on the other side of the river, and so on. And so there's a whole bunch of funding things that we've been working on putting together for the last several years for this. And this is, a nice thing that we don't have to spend, we hope, too much or almost any city money on. So we're just, continuing to work to put that money together for all of this so we get a nice new bridge.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have been joined by Mr. Lee, Andrew Lee from the Law Department. Andrew, are you aware of the question that was asked?
I don't know the specifics of the question, Mr. Chair, so I'd appreciate it if it could be restated.
Did you want to restate it, Julia?
Yeah, sure. So when this was discussed at Programs and Services, Chair Krinsman asked about, he wanted to see ensure that it was like a permanent open space restriction on it one way or another. And Ms. Martin was saying, Barney was saying that you all thought the cleanest way was to put it under the jurisdiction of the Parks and Recreation and Culture Department. And my question was, is that sufficient to have it have Chapter 97 protection, or do we need to do something more to establish that it is a small park?
So to be clear, the department that has custody of it isn't determinative of whether or not it's Article 97 protected land. What is the purpose that it's acquired for? So in the order, the draft order that should be with the packet, it's explicitly stated that it's being taken for park purposes. That designation itself brings it under the purview of Article 97. So it can't be taken out for park purposes unless we get the approval of the general court.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right. Sounds like we have that covered. Thank you, Andrew. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the item?
I'll move approval.
Okay, Council Humphrey moves approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Okay, 402-24 Community Preservation Committee recommending appropriation of $17,500 in Community Preservation Act funds from the unrestricted budgeted reserves to the Control of Planning and Development Department for a grant to the Newton Planning Department for Phase 2 of the Mid-Century Architectural Survey. I see that we have Molly Hutchins here, and I note also that we have Ms. Lunan, who is the chair of the committee, is also here tonight. Molly, you want to start?
Yes, I'll share the presentation, and Susan, I think, will present while I operate the slides.
Okay.
Oh, she's on mute.
I just made you a co-host.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. The presentation is the Newton Architectural Survey from 1940 to 1975. Next slide, Molly. As you can see, this is a project overview. It's the second phase of this survey, which was initially funded in 2022. In a typical year, half of the demo review applications received by the NHC are for post 1945 structures. Buildings constructed between 1940 and 1972 make up roughly 16% of the city's building stock. Phase 1 of this survey inventoried 241 new buildings, providing preservation planners with valuable data on our city's architecture. And Phase 2 will particularly highlight areas and neighborhoods that were flagged for further study in this previous phase. Next slide.
Before we move on, I will just jump in here that the date range was expanded from the last phase to include everything that is 50 years or older of this, starting in this fiscal year. So everything that would be requiring demolition review this year. So we've added on 3 years there.
Thank you. We were requested to provide half of the project funding needed to hire preservation consultants and complete an in-depth architectural and historical survey of 140 properties, which were constructed between 1940 and 75. And the project was matched by a grant from the Massachusetts Historical Commission Survey and Planning Grant Program.
This I threw in last minute. This is an example of the kind of form that it's generated through this work. So 241 of these forms were then submitted to the state at the end of the last phase of the project. And this just gives you an idea of what they look like. They're usually 3 or 4 pages. There's then several pages of text after these.
As you can see, we took the money from our general budgeted reserves, and would like to award $17,500. And you can see the matching grant, so that the total CPA project funds are $35,000. Questions and discussion?
Okay, I see Council Malachi with their hand up. Why don't we start there?
So does this pay for everything in this time range that we have not yet reviewed, or will there be a phase 3?
I think that this pays for everything that's in this time range. Molly, you think that we have more to do?
We do have more to do. The prices are set by MHC. So how many forms we get is usually a math problem of what the rate is for the consultant and how much time they have. We had a few years ago 3,000 buildings that needed to be inventoried. Of course, many of them have been demolished in the meantime. And firm numbers on that, we'll only know after each phase how much is what neighborhoods haven't been documented yet and what areas are highlighted for further study. Kathleen Broomer, the consultant in the last phase, highlighted several neighborhoods that needed further study at the end of the previous phase. So these are those.
Okay, so yeah, because the backup material you provided, it seemed to be select neighborhoods, but it seemed like somebody had to pick and choose which ones to target. And yeah, it wasn't clear what would be left after that, but I was happy to see like the Hazelhurst neighborhood. But is it I would think that the assessing department could give you a breakdown of existing buildings by year built.
Yes, and I'm sorry, David Lewis, who is the preservation planner and who deals with this work most often, is also on this meeting. That map that we originally showed is the GIS map for buildings built in that time period. It does require constant updating, though, as you know, as someone who has been to the Newton Historical Commission meetings and seen the demo delay process in action. And getting this information from the survey will help keep those numbers current.
Okay. All right. I hope it leads to more of them being preserved, but I think that remains to be seen. Okay, thank you.
Council Mickley?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be a question beyond finance focus, but just really out of curiosity, trying to understand what is done with the output of this report and survey. I thought it was interesting you chose the Star Market in Newtonville. Personally, I love that Star Market. It's one of the only supermarkets I know with a conveyor belt that goes down to where you pick up your stuff, and I find it extremely convenient, and I hope it gets preserved. I know there's mixed views about the architectural design of it, so just wondering, what do we do with this output? Is it telling us these are all buildings to preserve? These are all buildings to consider preserving? Really just curious about the process here.
I can defer to David, David Lewis, who's on the call. I did, before I had this position, staffing for CPC, have his job. So I can also personally speak to the fact that it mostly first provides real concrete data that the preservation planners can work with and use to inform their recommendations to the or to the Historic Commission. And I think David can probably speak more to that.
David, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Like
Go
Molly
ahead.
said, I definitely think it really helps in providing information to us, historical background data on the properties that come up for demolition review for the NHC. We get a lot of applications. We are up to 229, I believe, historical review applications thus far this year. So we like to do background research into all of those properties, and having the data on these, the inventory forms really helps us in making the determinations, like Molly said, and determine what will be brought before a meeting of the full commission, as well as the recommendations that we make to the Historic Commission of whether or not, we feel something should be preferably preserved. And just, another part of this is that all of this information does become public record. It becomes part of the state cultural resource database, and therefore, is a public good as well, and can be used for, anybody who wants to know more about, their house, their neighborhood, house or building that they see in Newton. It's not just a benefit to city staff, it's a benefit for anybody who lives in or is interested in Newton.
Makes sense. Thank you.
So David Lewis, is the goal, and Molly and Susan, is the goal here to identify every property, whether it be residential or commercial or civic, every property that was constructed during this time period? What was it, 1940 to 1975, I think?
I think it's meant to be a catalog, and it's a reference. And a city like Newton deserves that kind of having that kind of file.
But I mean, that's the goal, is to identify all of them, all the properties built during that time?
As far as yes, Molly, wouldn't you say yes? Yeah.
I would say it's to identify which ones are intact, that haven't been altered to the point where they're no longer considered a historic resource, and to catalog those.
So the other part of your answer, Councilor Gentile, is that we are plugging away at different phases of this. We did one previous to this. We did this one. There may be a phase 3 that we apply for as well, because there's thousands of properties. And I think we are fortunate to have the same preservation planner that we had previously as the consultant, that is familiar with Newton, that knows where to go next. But likely there will be other phases of this to continue this work.
So the first phase that you've been talking about, is that the same time period?
It is.
Okay.
Approximately, yeah. Minus 3 years, right, Molly?
And we're doing phase 2 because, for whatever reason, and I'm just asking, I mean.
No. So the short answer is there's more work than money to do here. It would, and time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So phase 1, we identified, who knows, know, 63% of the properties and we're trying, and is the goal to try and get to 100%? And it might take a phase 3. Is that the best way of explaining it?
I think the best way of thinking about it is that we will never catch 100% because the total number of buildings we have to inventory is shrinking by the month. So eventually we will meet in the middle.
Okay. Council Bixby, did you have a question?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on Councilor Mickley's question, I guess, and to second the comments about the Star Market and it being great. And, there was a tremendous amount of backup here, which is great. But one thing that caught my eye was on page 81. It talks about the Chestnut Hill Mall and the intention being, I'm having trouble understanding this, but it says Chestnut Hill Mall define facades so that NHC can apply 50% demolition rule. So I don't know if you could just explain that a little bit, but I guess what I'm wondering is, are we doing this so we can preserve the mall? If you can just elaborate a bit. Thanks.
David, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. Yeah, so I think the Chestnut Hill Mall was one of, I think the majority of properties that were identified by our consultant in the last round of the survey were residential, but there were a handful of commercial properties as well. And that was one of them. And when it references the 50% rule and defining the facades, as that building or the mall was kind of built piece by piece, and we're hoping through the inventory form we can figure out, you know, sort of when exactly each part was built so that we can know which pieces are greater than 50 years old, which would be under historic review. And in addition, the 50% demolition rule is that if anything, if any building is, if you're going to alter or demolish greater than 50% of any one elevation of the building or a roof, it would require historic review and potentially be subject to demolition delay. And so that's what that is. But when the Chestnut Hill Mall was one of them, and I believe there's one other area building on our potential property list that we just decided it would be helpful to and beneficial, as we said, with part of it being, you know, not just for the purpose of demolition delay, but just for having a greater understanding of how, you know, the city was built over time and the history of our built environment, that it would be helpful to have some non-residential properties inventories this as well to tell a more sort of complete history of the city. So I'm trying to remember which one it is that's on here. That's another, you know, non-residential property, but that is part of why. Part of it is for the, you know, public information part, and also for when building permits might come up, we'll know when we need to apply the historic review process to it.
Okay. I mean, that, you know, a lot of these make a lot of sense. I guess I would express a little bit of concern about some of these buildings being suddenly then subject to a historic review when, I mean, who knows what will happen to any of them, but if we do this, is there concern about that then suddenly these buildings things can't be done to them or used for other purposes or changes made that might need to happen?
No, I think they were just put on the list as part of, like you said, what our consultant recommended to us is for study. And, you know, again, anything that's not in a historic district, the power of the NHC is limited to just, you know, demolition delay of up to a year or 18 months for National Register property. So if there was, you know, a proposed, you know, demolition or development, somebody could eventually do that if they wanted to, and it wouldn't be, it really wouldn't be for the sake of, you know, defining the different facades, wouldn't be for the sake of, you know, stopping anything. It would just be to define where we need to apply the historic review and what actually falls within the purview of NHC and of the, you know, 50-year point of historic review, and what, you know, might be a later addition that wouldn't need to be necessarily reviewed.
Okay. So, since you brought up the Star Market property a couple of times, as I'm prone to do as I get older, I like to share a useless factoid with you every now and then. So the Star Market was designed, or the architect that designed it, the family lived off of Auburndale Ave in Auburndale. And he had twin daughters, who went to Warren Junior High School. We were in the same class together. One of which was my 9th grade prom date, I'm proud to add. And I recently saw the twins at a 54th and 55th combined graduation get-together 2 weeks ago down at the 440. So there's a useless piece of information for you, but it's all true. It was an Auburndale resident. Anyway, Molly, your hand is up.
Yes, David provided a really good explanation of why it's important to sort of break down the analysis of these big commercial blocks. I just want to add to Councillor Bixby's question that anything 50 years or older has to apply for historic review. So it's not necessarily that it's going to be preserved or not, or that anything's going to happen, but an application needs to be submitted once something is 50 years old. And this would provide the data for us to understand that. And also, I used the Star Market form in the presentation just because it was the sample that was given in the last phase, and it's just it was the easiest for me to turn into an image in the PowerPoint. It's not really, I don't want anyone to think that it's a topic of intense conversation in any part of this survey.
Okay. All right, if there are not any other questions or comments, can I get a motion to approve the funding request?
I will move it.
Council Malikey's moved it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes again 7-0. Thank you, Molly and David and Susan, for showing up. We appreciate it. All right, last item is a reappointment. And again, as is the practice, at least in finance, if the person has been before us, as this gentleman has been, we don't ask them to come in. So it's 382-24 for the record. It is Her Honor the Mayor reappointing Antonio Bianchi, 15 Colonial Ave in Newton, as a constable for the city of Newton for a term to expire on November the 1st, 2027. I'm going to assume that the bond that Mr. Bianchi, as all constables are required to put up, that has been documented. Katie, are you able to confirm that?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's in the backup.
All right, I don't have my backup with me right now, so I'm going to assume that it is. Council Greenberg, do you have a hand up?
Oh, I was going to move approval. He's a
Okay.
Ward 1 resident. Thank you.
All right, so Council Greenberg is moving approval. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. That concludes our agenda for this evening. I'm about to wish you all a good night the rest of the night, unless somebody has something or they want to bring up or a comment. All right, seeing none, then we are adjourned, and have a great rest of the evening. Thank you all.
Night.